All right, welcome to the Sweet Talk. Today is February 5th, 2020. And yes, it is Wednesday. And today I have on Mr. Chris Harris and Jennifer Kressler Duda. They are teachers. Chris is a fellow educator from New Jersey, and Jennifer is an educator from Pennsylvania. And today they are going to be talking about
coding and robots.
Computational thinking,
Logic
navigating
reasoning.
the world using code and applications. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Thank you for actually being on. Let me get to that other screen. There we go.
There we go.
We were chit-chatting before the show started, and we pushed this show off for a couple
Months.
times already. Yeah.
Years.
So really glad that you guys, we coordinated to get on today. So thank you.
Yeah, no
well, thank
problem.
you so much for having us. And, we've been very excited since we had actually broached the subject at, the Google
Summit.
Google event in New York City.
Yeah.
And Go with Google. And this is really a very...
Here's some information about New York.
Oops, your Google Assistant came on.
Hey, Google, turn off.
A densely populated
Hey, Google.
You might want to mute the mic.
This is live. It's great. Well,
That's all good.
I'm tech oriented.
Yeah, you're good that way. It shows.
Okay.
So, Chris, why don't
Yeah.
you introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself, what you do every single day. And then while Jen's figuring out her Google Assistant, we can learn about you.
Okay. My name is Chris Harris. I'm the Director of Tech at Pennsauken Public Schools. Prior to that, I was a principal. I was a principal at Mercer Special Services, where I work with Jen. Prior to that, I was down at Salem County Special Services. So I have a background in special education, working in a couple different special services districts, as well as vocational education, and currently tech. So I kind of got into this, when I was in the special services district, working with some students there. It was a kindergarten through 21 building. My kids at home were starting to get into coding and robots. I bought some toys at home, started to bring them into work, and it kind of grew from there.
That's awesome. All right, Jen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kressler Duda. I am a special education teacher at Mercer Elementary School in the Mercer County Special Services School District. I've always been a special education teacher, so I knew right when I walked into this district that it was like my home. Like, this is what I needed to do. So I've been here. I like the furniture. I changed my furniture, but I am the furniture. And I love special needs children, and I've learned so much from them and been able to problem solve myself by figuring out how to adapt what the regular community-based schools are doing and bring it back to my students. So this is very exciting for me, because when I met Chris Harris, when he came in and he was talking about like coding and robots, it was actually kind of scary, because I was still teaching my kids like basic recall, like WH questions. And he's like, oh, we're going to teach them coding and robots. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, game on, we can do that. And when he started taking me to the ed camps and everything, I got to see actually what regular ed was doing, because I'm a bubble outside of a bubble. If you're in special ed, you're in a bubble. But when you are in a special services district where every single child has an IEP, then you are in a bubble outside of a bubble. And I didn't understand how far outside of the bubble I actually was, because I was always special ed. And I got to see how the amazing, crazy, awesome, cool, fabulous things all these other people were doing. And I'm like, my kids need that too. So that's when I started bringing it back to my classroom and trying to troubleshoot and problem solve how they can also have the same experiences and gain the same exposure to the same things that, these crazy, awesome, cool, fabulous things that, the kids in the community-based schools were receiving. So that's where it started. So.
Yeah, no, I am I love computer science. I mean, I'm a proponent of it. I think it should be supported in all the classes, all subject areas. So, I really want to hear from your perspective, because your perspective is not in the bubble. You're right. So I am in the bubble. I'm in regular ed. So it's nice to hear another perspective of it from that point of view, how beneficial and influential computer science, coding, robotics, drones,
Oh, it's so much fun. It's so much
Yeah.
fun.
augmented reality can be in that. So, because really, I call it computing skills. We talk about computational thinking, logical thinking, problem solving, and then you have, perseverance, patience, you have communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And that, I bundle it all as computing skills, and all these skills are definitely needed, much needed for
in
these
all
students
areas.
when they
In all
graduate,
areas.
in all
Whether
areas. Yep. Because, the kids today, I find that when something gets too hard, they shut down and they give up. And that's part of perseverance. Like, they have to go back in and do the design process and figure out where the problem is, and try to come up with a solution and test it. And,
Well,
so like, how do you go about that process with your students? And then, like, what are some of the tools that you use to engage your students in this kind of computational or computing skills and thinking skills?
well,
Go ahead,
I mean,
Chris. We'll let you answer that one.
well, I mean, from an administrator perspective, I'm not a classroom teacher. So I think it's a job of an administrator to go out and find what's going on in the world and bring it back to your school. When I was at the vocational school and the special services districts, there are schools of choice. So I think you always have to kind of show off what you're doing, kind of make you, more appealing to parents when, people are shopping around for different placements. So, as a public school of choice, your lifeblood is the sending districts. They're going to send you students, and you want to have every experience that a regular ed kid would get in the special ed world. I mean, my rule is always, if it's good enough for special ed, or good enough for regular ed, it's good enough for the special ed kids. So we started doing things during the day, dances, plays, assemblies that you would get in the regular ed world. And, kind of started with some of the teachers. We decided to do a club period during the day because we're at the mercy of the buses. We had kids that were on a bus for 45 minutes. So we had to do it all during the school day. So, a couple days a month, first and third Wednesdays kind of a thing, we would break out for clubs, guitars, Minecraft, all that fun stuff. And that's kind of where the coding started, to expose the kids to it. And the idea was that every teacher would have something they could, take and give to the kids on their own time. So some people liked crafts, some people got into coding. I kind of got into the coding stuff myself, so I kind of ran with that. I had kids at home, twin boys that were into it. I started buying the robots at home, started bringing that into school, and it kind of started from there. So, initially, code.org was kind of out there at first, and, I kind of got all the teachers into that, and we started doing the hour of code, and it kind of started from there. And from that, I really got into it and started buying more robots and finding more online services. It's like the perfect time, as administrator, because, the price point of the devices is pretty cheap nowadays. You can get Chromebooks for $300. You can get iPads for $310. Most of these companies went after educators. So most of the stuff for educators are free, especially the stuff that we use. When I went to Mercer, I found Jen. Jen got into it. Her kids loved it. And she kind of ran with the ball from there. So you can talk about some of the stuff that you do in your classroom.
All right. So what I found in my classroom is that my students, they don't like to be wrong. And I also found with my own children, they don't like to be wrong. And when they find that, like, they're wrong or their answer is wrong, it's very delicate how you handle that situation, because there can be a huge consequence in, reactional behavior that comes with them being wrong. But what I found also is that, I teach applied behavior analysis all day long. So I'm breaking big concepts up all day long into smaller steps. For example, like if I ask a kid to go get a pencil across the room, or a ball, or, some object that is located across the room, you would think that was a one-step direction. Now, for these students, it's not one step. You actually have to teach them, they have to push their chair back, they have to stand up, they have to turn around, they have to walk a certain number of steps to said object, they have to bend over, pick up said object, stand back up, turn around, walk back to chair, sit down in chair, hand over said object. And, it could be up to 12 steps, but that is something that I'm already teaching. So what I found with coding, and at first I went to code.org like everyone else, and code.org is amazing, but it was too high for my kids. So my kids, have been middle school age children who are physically, could be anywhere from like 4th through 8th grade, but developmentally, cognitively, they are like 6 months to 1st grade. I had one kid that it was generously like 2nd grade. And so a lot of my kids aren't reading, and a lot of my kids are struggling with the verbal recall of their words and conversational skills and initiation of skills and life skills and so on and so forth. But I'm already breaking down what we think are small concepts, but they're big concepts, into very small steps. So when you're taking it at a coding perspective, when I started looking into applications that would work for my students, that would teach them problem solving, logic, reasoning, so on and so forth, I was looking for things where I didn't need the kids to actually know how to read. I needed it to be very visual, very like the block-based coding, so on and so forth. Now, what I've found is that by doing that, it's breaking down every step. So we need to get this character from this space to this space. And so they start with like simple sequencing. So it's like walk, 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 jump, walk. Now, if you're walking more than if you're doing any type of code more than once, you're going to use a loop. So now I'm teaching looping. And then if the person or object hits an object, then you're teaching conditional. So you're going to go forward forever because we need to get the person from A to B. But if it hits an object, now we're teaching conditional. So if hits object needs to move up one space and to right, and then it'll continue with your sequencing and your loop. So it gets more complicated, but it's breaking down concepts. It's teaching concept by concept instead of teaching the syntax, of the typing. So they're understanding the logic behind it now, which also really helps my students with problem solving and logic and reasoning, is that they love to make their character die first. They love to make the problem happen first. They want the characters to fall. They want them to fall in the water. They want them to get hit by laser beams. They want the worst possible thing to happen. And I let them, because they're interested in figuring out how to make that work. Now, once they've killed their person or their objects, or it didn't work many times and like the signal goes off, and they laugh because I think that's hilarious. It's like the first time my kids could get the answer wrong and there's nothing bad that's going to happen. They think it's funny.
That's like the reverse engineering.
Correct. So, all right. So I'm really good with behavior. That's actually my thing. Actually, that's my gift. So everyone else, like I looked at my friends growing up and like they could sing, they could dance, they had all these beautiful talents. And I'm like, I have no talent. I'm like so average. I'm like average across the board. And then I started teaching, children on, children. And I'm like, actually, I have a talent. I'm really good with behavior. I'm really good with getting kids to believe in themselves. Confident with themselves and not want to hurt anybody or themselves. They actually are awesome.
So let me ask you this, Jen. Now okay. So, I'm a coder,
okay.
That's my mind, right? Computational. Yep. That's my mind, sequencing step by step. So when you were explaining all that before in the coding world, walk, walk, walk. And then if you hit something,
go up. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Do you find that thinking process helps them
it bleeds into other aspects?
Yeah. That's what I was just going to make sure, because that's important. Yep.
Here again, my students have a difficult time generalizing concepts. They have a difficult time generalizing it. But once they start thinking, like, for instance, every year I get my kids, and I have a different class every year. Some kids I have more than 1 year, which is great. Some kids I have up to 5 years, which is awesome. And then it's really hard to lose them because they are now your actual children. Like, you've birthed them, you love them that much. But I get to see the progress in their thinking. So, for instance, computational thinking, if you're doing conditionals, like if it is raining, you need to, bring an umbrella. Like if it's cold, you wear a coat. Like it's all of this if then it's all broken down, but you're doing it all day long and you're giving them a visual a visual area or piece in time where they can actually showcase that. Like, for instance, I was teaching a class on stacking and queuing, and I was using CodeSpark Academy. And, you know, all the animals were falling down and so on and so forth. And, you know, I have but at the time I had very intelligent people in my classroom, like educated adults in my classroom. And so I will teach something and we will learn together. And I find that that also models for my students how, when Miss Jen is frustrated, what that looks like and how I can work through. And I will state what I'm thinking to go through the process of, like, what's the next step? And we're all helping each other. We're coming together to help each other. And I had my occupational therapist who graduated from, like, Columbia. I had my behaviorist. I had her intern. I had some of my interns. None of us, including the students, we're all getting frustrated. So we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, what am I missing? I had a student come back, not verbal, can't read, come back, and he, you know, came into the classroom and was like, you know, Miss Jen, like, teacher, you know, my turn. I'm like, yes. Like, your turn, yes. And so I handed him the iPad. So I mirror everything. So when I teach a coding group, we work together as a group and we all problem solve, and we can see it on the Apple TV behind us. And then we'll break into smaller groups to then practice that skill that we had just learned. And this child came in and I handed him the iPad and I said, go. And you know that little stinker bug, I'm telling you right now, he got it the first time.
Can't underestimate these kids.
The first time. This kid just came back from speech therapy. He got it the first time. He couldn't explain how he did it. So in my room, it's show me, not tell me. It's like, show me, like, what you know, not tell me. Show me what you know. And what was great about it is that I could push the replay button on the iPad, and he loves doing things over and over again, and over and over and over and over again. And I also like doing things over and over and over again. So I could say to him, you know, slow, again, slow. Miss Jen needs to understand, again, slow. And he's like, yay, you know, and he would do it slowly. And then I could see the thought process, and then I could help explain it to, like, everyone else. But he got it the first time. He was like,
awesome.
He won, like, the Super Bowl. Like, I don't even know what to say. Like, here's a kid who can't read, who's on, like, a K level, who just finished something that, like, we all have master's degrees.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
And you know what I think it is too? Sometimes we as adults, we think it's more harder than it really is.
Well,
and we think it's more complicated than it really is. And the kids, I think they look at it in a different perspective, and they just see it, like, in a simpler way.
It makes sense to them, and they're not scared.
The hardest part is getting the adults to do it. I mean,
Well,
the kids grew up with this. So the kids are used to it. The kids grew up with the devices. The kids know how to use the devices. The kids are comfortable playing the games. The hardest part as an administrator is trying to find the teachers who actually want to do this and incorporate it into their lessons.
But I'll tell you what, when I did, and this was, like, the best. Like, so we have, I have a CoSpaces premium account.
Yep.
And we did digital storytelling. So I used the ELA.
I love
teacher,
that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
I do SEL through digital
and
storytime, but not.
I actually found one teacher that wanted to do it. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting on this train, and I'm going to grab him in. He was in my room for a week, and the kids created a storyboard, and then they used CoSpaces to create their scenes, and then
their emotions and their problem solving.
They were coding, and those kids were so engaged, and I was just like, we need to get this out.
Yeah.
And have more of the ELA teachers using this, because
exactly
this showcased their creativity plus all of the computing skills, and it's for anybody.
And it shouldn't be taught in isolation.
Exactly.
So I still have a hard part convincing people, like, you don't need a computer lab anymore if your district's 1-to-1. you should incorporate all the things that you did back in the computer lab days in your everyday lessons. We don't need to pull the kids out to teach them how to type. You should be typing in your classes now. You should be doing all those things as part of your lessons. And you should incorporate all this other fun and amazing stuff. And it's going to make your day go by that much quicker because the kids are going to get that hook and they're going to be into it.
Listen, I've
Jen's about to explode, so I got to let her talk.
I've taught time. I've taught social studies, science, so and so forth. My students are asking me, like, can we use this is actually the sign for robots, so it's kind of crazy because it actually looks like the robot did. But like, they'll ask me to use, like, are we using the robots for this lesson? And I maybe hadn't planned on using the robots for the lesson, but the fact that like, I'm not teaching them at that point, I'm not grading them on how they're coding. I'm grading them still in the concepts, but I'm using that as an engagement factor. If you go into any counselor's office when any kid is getting counseling, there's typically like the therapist or the counselor and the student sitting across the table. What's in between them? A game, because students and children and adults have an easier time talking about things and being open to things when there's an object that's that is in between them and another person. Now, if my students who are, generally all diagnosed on the autism spectrum disorder, they have a lot of anxiety when it comes to people. Think about just this podcast right now. I've gotten really happy. I've talked really fast. I've talked really low. My intonation changes. The sound of my voice changes. But with the computer and technology and with robots, it doesn't. It's consistent. It's safe.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
When you place an object between a person and an individual, whether or not they're neurotypical or they're on the spectrum, you are giving them the ability to open up their space to feel safe in order to engage. And they'll be able to show you more. Now, again, my students are also very visual and hands-on, which, also helps when it comes with coding. But we have read stories. They've created their own storyboards. They have made their own game designs and then coded through it. And they, some of them can't read. Some of them can read, but they're reading on a first grade level.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they're able to do these things.
They're acquiring these high level skills.
And they're not afraid to fail with them. That's another thing. Their perseverance, they're gaining logic, reasoning, thinking. They are no longer afraid or disappointed when it doesn't work, because they're excited on figuring out how.
So how does that all go into your daily routines in class? So really quick. So when they come into your classroom and they're, they're unpacking their book bag, or they're putting their jackets away, they get their snacks, or they transition to another class. Does all of those skills, do you see all of those skills, all those multi-steps, process and sequence and skills that you see in coding, does it go into the everyday normal classroom procedures?
Well, right. So
see the benefit of it.
I'm going to say absolutely it does. Yeah. And I'm going to say that I have, by the time my students come to me, they have been very prompt dependent. And so they have a lot of skills, but they don't know how to generalize those skills out, without being prompted to do so in some way, shape, or form. So my job as a teacher at this point is using those skills that they have gained, throughout the years, and then having them become more independent so that it becomes a more student-centered classroom. And I've read books on it, and I've implemented a lot of strategies with them. But because of the fact that I will use coding throughout the day. Now, I have a coding class I teach. And again, coding is just and I want to, not many people know this, but it's just like a small piece of computer science. Mm-hmm. But using it with my students, I've been able to see into their capabilities much better than I would have been able to if I had not had that, right? And I've been able to then create programs for them where they can become more independent because of the fact that I'm using it, and because of the fact that the way I'm teaching it and they're learning it, they are generalizing it throughout the day. So
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's important for people to realize, because like I always try to tell people, you get what you put out, right? Like you put the effort in, you're going to get your return.
Yeah.
You definitely will. Like you have to take the initiative. You got to put the time in to learn it, but in the end, it's going to be rewarding, whatever with your student success, or you get some time back, or whatever it is. So, like for me, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think it's important to so that people can see the connection, especially in the classroom that you're teaching, that you see that those computing skills carrying over into everyday simple procedures that once were the students needed to be prompted for. Now it's kind of more of an automatic.
Well, you're
It's
dealing with
becoming a rote routine. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
It's always about communication,
Yep.
behaviors, and I also like to throw in, vocational skills, especially when you're dealing with that population. So anything you can do to help a child communicate, anything you could do to work on social skills. I think the computer science, coding, robots piece really helped those kids a lot, and they enjoy it. And if you get them into something, it makes your lesson that much easier.
Well,
So
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So what are, just briefly, like what are some of the tools that you use with the students? You said code.org, but
Well, I started with code.org, but it was too high. So
Okay.
then I went to Swift Playground, and that was still too high. And then I found Box Island. And it was great because it was free for educators for the hour of code. But if you wanted more of their program, you would have to pay for it, which was only like a few dollars. It wasn't much, but you couldn't set up a classroom or anything. So again, I could still do it as a group lesson. I could use arrows, and they would make their box fall into the water, get zapped by lasers, and die by lava and all that fun stuff. And then as I kept going, then I found CodeSpark Academy. And when I found CodeSpark Academy, I started because it was literally taking concepts such as sequencing, advanced sequencing, then it was taking conditionals, variables, functions, and it had different puzzles that you would do. And then it gave you a space where you could create your own game board designs. I now also do storyboards where I teach, social emotional learning through it. So I'll give, the kids a problem, or we'll have a story, like a simple story that we read, and then they pick the characters and they can design them. And then they have to code them to speak to each other. Like, this is what happened, or this person pushed this person. What do we do now? Like, how does that person feel? And then they have to code their face. Like, what does that face look like? Because my students have a hard time understanding the facial expressions, of other people. And that's really important. That's a huge social skill that they're lacking.
Yeah.
And we're able to do that. Now, again, I will say that because I started posting videos and so on and so forth on CodeSpark, I am the special ed subject leader for CodeSpark. I don't get paid for it, so I don't feel like I don't want this to be like a
sales pitch
for them. But I do find like that is like my kid's favorite, thing. The outside of the robots, when I bring the robots in, like that's a whole other, story.
Well, what kind of robots do you use?
Well, we've used Ozobots, Sphero, pretty much anything from the Sphero company. And
Sphero is amazing.
Yeah. The companies that basically made it are the ones who went after the educators, I think. So early on, all these companies started off as toys, remote controlled toys that you needed a device to use. But then they flipped it to the educational side where they did some sort of drag and drop coding, which is all the stuff we played with in the special ed world.
And also we'll build towards, writing, in Python or Java and so forth.
So in special ed, elementary ed, you're going to start with the drag and drop coding, and then it's going to progress middle school, high school. Obviously, you're going to get into real coding. But the idea is that we would do it to expose the kids to it so that by the time they're in middle school, by the time they're in high school, they have a background in this. And again, It doesn't matter if you're special ed or regular ed, you still want to expose the kids to it because you don't know what's going to happen to that kid when they're in high school. Like, they might really find their thing and take off with it.
Right.
We teach kids poetry. We don't expect every kid to be a poet, right? We want them to learn how to think. That is the biggest piece. We need them to learn how to think. And this is just another way to think.
Yeah,
it's fun. The kids get into it. I mean, a lot of the teachers are really starting to get into it. Even where I'm at now, they're starting to do more of it in the elementary school. Some of the librarians are starting to get into it. So I'm buying more of these devices for people to use, which I think is great. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to do the whole makerspace thing. So, I mean, really starting to put money into that now, where I've gotten some Ozobots, or people have gotten a bunch of Sphero bolts, Somalis, starting to get some tello drones out to people. And actually where I'm at now, we have a really good middle school robotics group, 3 great teachers that have been doing robotics in the district. So we're trying to basically get that into the elementary. So they have the elementary, intermediate, middle school, and all the way up through high school.
Nice. That's nice. Yeah. I mean, we just did, I'm the robotics advisor with the science teacher at my school, and we just completed the first Lego League competition using the Lego EV3 Mindstorms.
Yep.
And so we use them in robotics club. But yeah, so that was fun. And
so we have those in our middle school, but they haven't competed with them yet. But my kids are actually they're actually robotics practice tonight because they're in the high school team now. So
okay,
gonna pick those guys up in a little bit. They're building the bigger robots this year, which is kind of fun.
I'm telling you, it's fun. It was interesting. I mean, this was our first year doing it, second year doing robotics club, but first year competing, and it was a learning curve.
Yeah,
I definitely learned a lot, and I'll be more apt to change and evolve for next year. But you know, it was a great experience. It was a lot of things that you had to prepare for and do, but I would definitely highly recommend it. Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, they actually hosted at my kids' high school. The middle school team had a big, Lego robotics event. So I actually got to judge it, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool. So
I got to see the different teams come in. Yeah, it was kind of neat to see all the kids doing their different things and the different presentations they had to do. It was surprising that there were a lot of independent teams as well as school teams.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I guess a
lot of parents just have kids in the neighborhood. They started their own club and they would,
club. It's interesting, And
a lot of kids are into it.
Yeah, it is. I hear you. I mean, I'm so glad that you guys came on today and shared about your, this computer science code and application, integrating it into all of the, your curriculum and your special education students. It's definitely important.
I think it's important for teachers to understand that even though it sounds scary, we're not computer scientists. Like, we didn't go to school for computer science. We don't understand necessarily computer science. But what I feel like what most teachers need to know is that you can learn with the kids. It's okay. It's okay to learn with the kids. Yeah. And you don't have to be, at this point, there's so many applications out there that are very intuitive, and you will get stuck, but it's not going to be the downfall of Rome.
And I tell people too, ask the kids how to do it.
The kids already know how to do
it. They already know.
Sometimes I hate the fact that I don't know just so they can help me, because when they think they're helping the teacher, they feel like absolute rock stars. And that's how I want them to feel. Yeah. And I don't want them to think I know everything.
The best is when the kids teach the other kids.
Yeah.
They love that.
All good.
It's great to watch.
It's all good. But you're right though, teachers are very hesitant with this because they're scared. And there's so many great resources out there like CS First, Code.org. They have resources within those applications that get you started, and you don't even have to know.
You don't have to know anything. You don't even have to know what a sequence is.
No, read the content that comes
scope
with
and sequence charts are out there. The lesson plans are out there. Videos are out there.
Yeah, you don't need to review anything.
If nothing else, go to the tech person and say, "Can you just demonstrate something for me?"
Yeah.
I will go into anyone's classroom and in any, whether it's multiple disability, whether it's autism. And again, my school is 100% IEP, so it's all program based. But the BED program, the MD program, the autism program, the CS classroom, I can show you that it's not as scary as it sounds. And I think that is where most people stop. I think they hear coding, robots, computer science, and they stop because they're terrified. They want to do whatever they put out there, they want it to be perfect. Right. And they don't know whether it's going to be perfect if they don't know it. But here's the thing. There's so many life skills you're teaching students when you're exposing and giving the experience with computer science. And there's so many applications out there that will teach you along the way. And you know what, if I don't leave a lesson where I didn't learn something for my students, then I need to try again.
Right. And you know what, it's good to also state too, in my opinion, if you give this to a BD teacher or an MD teacher in like a school district that I work with, you got to make sure that you tell the teacher also, like, hey, start small.
Well, listen, start small
20
anyway.
minutes, 15,
But don't
20
give
minutes.
excuses that you
And
can't
then,
do
Yeah.
it.
right.
But I
And
think
then
once
you
the
build on
teachers
that.
realize that the kids are interested in it, it makes it so much easier.
Right.
Because when the kids are interested, that's half the battle. I mean, half
Mhm.
the battle is getting the kids interested in what you're teaching. And if you teach in isolation, it makes it that much harder to get the concept. If you teach, from like a project-based learning approach, where you make it interesting and relevant to what the kids are into, it's half your battle. And it's the same with the coding and the robots. The kids are interested in playing with the tech. The kids are interested in the devices. The kids are interested in the robots. They love flying the drones. They love piloting the spheros around. You just flip it and make it educational, and that's
And listen, any teacher that will say, and because if they have a classroom with high behaviors, they may be afraid of the devices getting broken. And that's another thing. Like, well, my kids are going to throw it, or my kids are. I'm telling you right now. Well, one, they are durable, but like two, they're less likely to throw it because they actually want to. I actually have a significant decrease in student behavior, just because I do this all day long. Like when I
have seen kids.
I don't
have seen kids where they've accidentally flown them into walls, bounced them off of cinder block walls, and these devices.
They may have thought it was a kickball at first, but it went back together just fine.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: the behavior data that I'm taking in my classroom has decreased significantly using coding and robots, using this piece of computer science, because it allows them to show and become confident in themselves without needing another human being to be that knight in shining armor. They don't need a knight in shining armor. They can be their own knight in shining armor, and it's not a human telling them that that's possible. It's them. It's coming from them.
Yeah.
And that's an intrinsic learning. Like we're teaching extrinsic learning all the time. You get this reward, you get this trophy, you get this. My students just want to know that they can do it.
Yeah.
And they get mad and upset when they can't. And
when they're successful, it breeds more success.
And it's a celebration.
Yeah.
And when they struggle with coding, they actually find it amusing, and they're willing to continue to figure out the problem, how to solve the bug. They love debugging. Like, this is the sign for bug, by the way. So they love debugging, and I also will allow them to do so. Here, we're game. What are we going to debug today? So
now, I mean, it's all relevant. I could sit here and talk to you about it for another hour, but we got to wrap it up.
All right, I'm good.
This is like, and I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions after we disconnect. But
okay.
What I'm gonna do is, I know you mentioned a couple, different tools that you use. What I'm gonna do is have you guys contribute in the Wakelet collection for the show notes.
Sure.
And just add the links in there that you use. You had mentioned CodeStars.
CodeSpark.
CodeSpark.
And CodeSpaces and CodeStars. CodeStars is really good for middle school.
I'll put mine in there, but you can add the ones that you mentioned because I never heard of them before. Either Blocklight, you said?
It was Box Island.
Box Island. I never heard of that one. So just put that in there, and then at least it can be available for the audience on my website.
That'd be awesome.
So we're gonna wrap up the show. What I'm gonna do is share my screen real quick. Let me just open up a new tab, and okay, can you guys see my screen?
I can.
All right, so if you go to my website, thesuitetalk.com, that's the SUITE talk.com, you will see tonight's episode here on the homepage, and you can go to the episode list page, and you can see all of the past episodes that were recorded, and you can click on the YouTube link and the show notes as well. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, on the homepage, if you scroll down to the guest inquiry button, you can fill out the guest form, and you can be a guest on my show. I'm actually scheduling right now for June. So you can certainly fill out the form. You can see who's on my show on my calendar here. Here's a couple quick links here. You can join the Facebook community as well. And basically, you can also subscribe to the Sweet Talk on YouTube, subscribe to the Sweet Talk on Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Google Podcasts as well, and sign up for this newsletter. And that's basically it. I'm going to go back, stop sharing my screen. And one more thing that I'm going to do is just pitch out that I wrote a book with Alice Keeler.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. And it's basically on Google Classroom. It's stepping up to Google Classroom. And it's a beginner guide. And I'm going to put the link to the newsletter. If you want to get updates about when it's going to be available, you can sign up on Alice's newsletter link and you will get emailed the updates. So
Excellent.
with that said, I am going to say goodbye to you guys. It was really a pleasure. I really was
Always a pleasure.
enjoyed the conversation again. We're going to talk after the show is over for a minute, so don't hang up. But until next time, have a great night, everyone. Thank you for
You too.
tuning in.
Good night.
Bye.